we'll move on to Lowell Cauffiel, who, as Sandra introduced him, is a writer and has intimate experience that he has kindly agreed to share with us, and particularly how it has affected him as a writer and how he tells stories about his life dealing with these issues.
Thank you, Neil. You know, I was sitting here thinking before we started that I wanted to, it's really an honor to be the resident dope fiend among such an esteemed panel. But then when you
admitted,
then when you started talking about medical school and whether you ever thought you would be at the WGA, I thought 27 years ago, as I was cutting up 3 ounces of quality Peruvian rock cocaine with a lab scale in my office to sell to friends and drinking a half a gallon of whiskey, if I ever thought I'd be sitting with the deputy director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse.
Eat life a hoot.
Well, we put you on different ends here. So.
In Hollywood, at the Writers Guild, and all we need is like a couple of DEA agents, and it would be a complete mind blower. Sandra asked me if I could talk a little bit about like what happened to me, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now in the context of addiction. I've been sober and clean for 25 continuous years, but those years, I didn't do it. I had a lot of help, and that's sort of a lot to put into 5 minutes. So I decided to maybe focus more on the myths of experiences like mine and what people think an addict is and what recovery is like. And these are the kind of myths that are held by the average people that know nothing about it. But they're also reinforced by our industry, although we've gotten so much better at that in accurately portraying addiction with shows like House and Breaking Bad, but particularly by journalists who don't seem to understand the problem either. And one of the big myths is that it's all about the drug. Is cocaine addicting? Is it psychologically addicting? Is pot really addicting? It's not physically addicting, but it could be psychologically addicting. Heroin's physically addicting, and there's horrible withdrawals. And is alcohol really? All the chemistry involved. And in my experience and in an experience of many, many addicts and alcoholics I know, the drug really isn't the issue. The issue is the person taking the drug and what the drug does for that particular person. And we always say in recovery that addiction's got 3 stages. There's the fun stage, which is, doing it for pleasure. Then there's the fun and trouble stage. And then there's the all trouble stage. But looking back at my own life, I think the conditions were there for my addiction long before I ever drank or used a drug, because I always felt, from even at a young age, that I'd been dropped off by aliens onto the earth, and that I somehow didn't fit in, that other people were having experiences of life, and my insides didn't match their outsides. And I think now we know it gets to this dopamine issue that he was talking about, kind of something lacking in my brain that didn't allow me to fully kind of experience real life and reality. And, for me, the best way to describe an addict is this joke that I've heard around in recovery circles, where a couple of psychologists decide to run a test on 3 different people with mental disorders. And the first is a neurotic, the second is a schizophrenic, and the third is an alcoholic. And they bring in the neurotic and say, we have one question to answer, how much is 1 + 1? And the neurotic goes, well, I think it's 2, but I have to check with my mother and see if she approves of my answer. They send him out. They bring in the schizophrenic, and they say, how much is 1 + 1? And he says, well, it's the color blue and green, and it's got a Jimi Hendrix solo. They send him out, and they bring in the alcoholic and says, how much is 1 + 1? He says, well, of course it's 2, but it's just not good enough.